President. It has now been 59 days since the Senate and the House passed our budget resolutions. The American people are now expecting us to get together and do everything possible to bridge the partisan divide and come to a bipartisan deal. And on this side, Senate Democrats are ready to get to work. But unfortunately, despite their focus over the past 2 years on the need to return to regular order, Republicans have been refusing to allow us to move to a bipartisan budget conference. Now, many members, including the ranking member on the Budget Committee, Senator Sessions, had been very clear up until recently that after the Senate engages in an open and fair budget markup process, quote, and this is his words, the work of conferencing must begin. Minority Leader McConnell said in January that if the Senate budget is different than the House budget, then, and I quote, send it off to conference. That's how things used to work around here. We used to call it legislating, unquote. Mr. President, I couldn't agree more with Minority Leader McConnell's words from in January. But over the past few weeks, we have tried now to move to conference 8 times, and each time Senate Republicans have stood up and said no. They've managed to stall for weeks now, but their excuses for not wanting to move to conference are changing. At first, Republicans told us that we needed, to quote, a framework before they'd allow us to move to conference, though they never explained what that meant, and frankly, a budget is a framework. Then the story changed and they told us they would only let us move to conference if we made certain guarantees about the outcome. Then, last week, the story changed again, and Senate Republicans claimed that despite the fact that we engaged in a fair and open budget process here in the Senate less than 2 months ago, they think we need a do-over with another 50 hours of debate on top of the 50 we've already done, and another round of unlimited amendments on top of the unlimited amendments that were moved already. Mr. President, this is absurd. First of all, to claim that regular order involves a second full Senate budget debate is simply not true. The Senate has never been forced to go through a full debate and open amendment process twice just to get to conference. Not one case, completely unprecedented. In fact, every single time since 1994 that the Senate moved to conference, it was done by unanimous consent with bipartisan support, which is the way it ought to be done. Second of all, Mr. President, the Senate engaged in a full and open debate in which any member could offer a budget amendment they want to. We did that a few months ago. I know all of my colleagues remember this. I certainly remember this. I'd be happy to quote some of what was said about the process if any reminders are needed, because as that debate came to a close in the wee hours of the morning, Minority Leader McConnell said that the Senate had just engaged in, quote, an open and complete and full debate. And he continued and he said, and I quote, I know everyone is exhausted and people may not feel it at the moment, but this is one of the Senate's finest days in recent years, and I commend everyone who participated in this extraordinary debate, unquote. My ranking member, Senator Sessions, said the Budget Committee markup was, and I quote, an open process where everybody had the ability to offer amendments. And Senator Sessions said on the floor as the debate was wrapping up, he was thankful that the Republicans had, quote, free ability to speak and debate, and for helping us move a lot of amendments fairly and equitably tonight. So, Madam President, there is no question. The Senate engaged in a fair and open and lengthy debate about the budget before we passed it. And there's absolutely no good reason to ask that we do this all over again unless the intention is to simply stall the process and push us closer to a crisis. So, Madam President, instead of scrambling to find new excuses for their budget conference flip-flops, I hope that Senate Republicans realize that their opposition to bipartisan negotiations is not sustainable and allow us to get to the table to move on this. I know that there are members who do not agree with the budget that was passed. They will have another opportunity to fight for changes in a bipartisan conference, which is how we do this. That is the responsible and appropriate path forward, and I hope that the Senate Republican leaders decide to move back to the position they maintained just a few months ago. I know a number of our colleagues on the Republican side have said to me privately and in public that they believe that we should move to conference, and I hope that we can do that. The challenges before our country in terms of our debt and deficit and the investments that need to be made and the certainty that Americans are looking to us for cannot be completed until we go to conference, work out our differences, and come back and move this forward. Madam President, I hope that this time, when I ask for unanimous consent to go to conference, that Senate Republicans will join with us so that the American people can see an open conference, move to a debate, and solve this very challenging problem we have in front of us. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 33, H-Con Res 25, the amendment which is at the desk, the text of S-Con Res 8, the budget resolution that was passed by the Senate be inserted in lieu of thereof, that H-Con Res 25 as amended be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that the Senate insist on its amendment, request a conference with the House on the disagreeing votes of the two houses, and the chair be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the Senate, all with no intervening action or debate.